All right, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming back. If you haven't been here before, as I've said at the beginning of each of our panels today, we have some words of thanks that we need to make. First, we'd like to thank the UL Alumni Association for allowing us to use their wonderful facility here. If you have a moment after the keynote address, you're welcome to walk around the house or walk around the grounds and see this beautiful facility that they have. Secondly, I'd like to thank AOC Community Media. They're the cameras that are set up around the room. They're recording this. They're recording this so that it can be shared with a much broader audience through both their open access channels on television and through the World Wide Web. Finally, I'd like to thank once again the College of Liberal Arts and Dean Jordan Kelman, who's here, for the moral and financial support that helped make this program come off. And now I have a special introduction that I'm going to share with you, if it starts.
This new task force that is being established to deal with Katrina, who will be in charge? Who will run this operation? A one-star, a two-star, a three-star, or a four-star general?
Our understanding at this point, and the announcement is not officially out yet, is it will be a three-star Army general.
This is a complex problem. It's called a disaster. Look up the meaning of a disaster.
Friday, September 2nd, 4 days after Katrina hit, the cavalry has arrived.
Hey, weapons down! Weapons down, baby! Put the weapons down!
All I have to say this morning is hooray for Honore. This guy seems to be the perfect guy for this job. Seeing him in the streets of New Orleans, telling them to put their M16s down, for gosh sakes. And let's get some tension out of here. Let a little steam off, please.
You saw Honore yesterday doing really sort of almost symbolic things, but at one point, Barbara Stark, who's right along there with him, witnessed him come up to a mother who had twin babies, and she was struggling to even hold on to them. And he took the babies out of her arms, gave them to his soldiers, and arranged for them to immediately be medevac to a ship offshore. Now, that's just one person, but what it sends a message that they understand the problem. Of course, his whole point about having the soldiers put their guns down to again reinforce that they're here to help. They're not here to intimidate people.
Well, I'll tell you where blame doesn't lie, and that's with a straight shooting, take charge, John Wayne dude who never got stuck on stupid, who was exactly what the Gulf Coast needed right after Hurricane Katrina.
Don't get stuck on stupid, reporter.
That's BS. I will tell you that on behalf of every first responder down there. It's BS.
That's right, we'll never forget General Russell Honore's one-liners, but we'll remember what he did for the hurricane victims even more. When President Bush assigned the Louisiana Board General to command Joint Task Force Katrina, Honore knew this would be one of the most difficult missions in his career, but he was ready. He became an overnight hero.
Lieutenant General Honore is a native of Lakeland, Louisiana. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant of infantry and awarded the Bachelor of Science degree from Southern University and A&M College in 1971. He holds a Master of Arts degree in Human Resources and an honorary doctorate in Public Administration, an honorary doctorate in Laws, and an honorary doctorate in Humane Letters. He served in a variety of command and staff positions that have focused on defense support, civil authorities, and homeland defense. When we combine his work there with his other appointments and his other commands, the list is simply too long to enumerate. But of course, most of us know him as the commander of Joint Task Force Katrina, in which he led the Department of Defense response to Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And for his service, he has received, again, an extensive list and collection of honors, awards, and decorations, so extensive that I won't even attempt to repeat them. General Honore retired on February 29, 2008, following 37 years of active service with the United States Army. He is continually asked to speak and consult on a number of different topics, but most importantly, he speaks on what is called building a culture of preparedness. I decided to ask General Honoré to participate in this gun violence symposium today because of some comments that he made in the aftermath of the July shootings here in Lafayette. Most notably, he said, and this is a quote, "As a country, we're in a state of denial because we've confused the right to bear arms with the right to carry arms all the time, anywhere or any place you want. We have to have a different kind of conversation in America and be prepared to speak about the politically unspeakable." General Honoré.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I see I failed in some of my instructions to ask the professor to provide a lavalier mic because I like to move around a lot because I found out in the infantry a moving target's hard to hit. It's amazing in our culture how this topic of guns have woven itself into a reality that we used to watch on television. I am no match for those professors who've come up and talked to you in depth with data and statistics about what they have studied, what they have seen, and what they have deduced. That's not my specialty. If it's anything, I pride myself in being able to reflect on things and to try and bring people to a common solution under the realm of leadership. A few years ago, I wrote this book and published it. It was done by Acadian Press right here in Lafayette. It's called Leadership in the New Normal. One of the chapters in that book, I speak about investing in our human capital. Because too much of our human capital we lose every day. 88 people die in America a day from guns. 88 a day. Some of them are suicide, some of them are accident. The rest of them, you know, you've looked at the category. 88 a day. That's about as many people we have in this room. That's people that will never be able to contribute again to their fellow man, or to see grandchildren grow up, or to grow up into old age, or to have a happy experience of marriage or accomplishment. They're dead because of a machine, a gun. I, as an infantryman for 37 years and 3 months and 3 days, own guns. I've also been in the presence of 20,000 troops under my command on the DMZ in South Korea, all of them armed and ready. And the guns I was most afraid of on any given day were the guns of my soldiers. Not that they would shoot me, but they would accidentally shoot themselves or someone else. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what can happen when you got 20,000 people armed in one place, 24/7 with loaded weapons. It can happen. In the context, again, of why I'm here, when I go around the world, literally, and I go in the airport or check in at a hotel, it's amazing the people I just run into out of the clear blue that said, they look at me and say, "Put those guns down." From the clip. And some of them burst into tears and grab me and want to shake hands because of what that meant to them emotionally, of seeing me talk to our troops and telling them to put their guns down. And thanks to expert editing of some of our finest media people, there are a few other words mixed in between, but that's just a reflection of people at work, adults at work. They took some of that language out. But people remember that. If I stop on the way back in Henderson or in Brobridge, I will not get out of that town until somebody called me and said, "Hey," and they'll use that phrase or they'll ask me to repeat, "Don't be stuck on stupid." It's amazing. If we look at the repetitive problem we're going to wake up with tomorrow, on average, 88 people will be killed by guns. Now, I know the advocates for the gun industry, which is an industry that creates something us and the world want. We go out and buy them. And then many of those that get bought get stolen. And they end up in what I call the contraband economy. Our professor earlier spoke of an economy that happens. I refer to it as the contraband economy. That's what I call it in this book. When you do the graphics that were shown earlier, and you talk about where the incident happened and when they're happening, federal data show most of the killings happen between midnight and 2 in the morning. That's what we call in the military the red zone. Figure out what is the pattern. Become situationally aware when it is most likely for you to get killed or an incident to happen. When you draw that out a little further, you say what days of the weeks are more active than others. If you come between Friday night and Sunday night. That's the red zone. What is the solution? Well, cops alone won't stop it. More guns won't stop it. I think we need to talk about a cultural shift in America. Many of you and most of you in the room have witnessed at least 2 cultural shifts. The first one I'll speak to, if this was 20 years ago, how many people in the room would have a pack of cigarettes in their pocket? Think about it. If you didn't, your spouse smoked, and even some of your kids would be smoking. You'd walk up to a house or a front porch in Louisiana, and it looked like a weed party. I mean, you know. Some of them were smoking and dipping and chewing simultaneously. Why? Because we had a right to do it, right? We had a right to smoke. And led by a very vocal and outspoken Surgeon General, what did he tell us? You're killing yourself. What was the recourse from the industry? We create jobs. Look how many jobs we create. Look how much tax we generate for your school system. You remember those first arguments? And oh, by the way, it's a right for you to smoke if you like to smoke, right? You remember that? And then somehow all the commercials got prettier and prettier girls on them and fine cars. And, you know, then they came out with the lighter version of smoke, you know, the menthols and the lights. That's like eating light boudet. All right, croton, crackers. There's no such thing as, there's not a healthy version of that. You know, you got to mingle that out. And no disrespect to my friends in Brobridge when I go through there. I'll have to pick a couple pieces up, but it comes with a warning. Yet, today, 88 people a day die from gun violence. The ones we remember most are the ones that hit television. The Aurora, Colorado event, you know, the Columbine. The Sandy Hook School. The shooting here in Lafayette. And the normal scenario, Anderson Cooper show up, right? And one of the team from Fox, my buddy there from Gulfport, Mississippi, if it's south of the Mason-Dixon line, he show up. Then Brian Williams used to show up till he got caught lying, you know, and being a part of the story. They all show up. The cameras get turned on, and the tragedy, this current day's tragedy, it's like going and watch in the day before we had television, people would get all built up in Lafayette a few times a year, and in New Orleans, one of these New York shows would come to town, and it would demonstrate some life experience that everybody would talk about. Whether it was a replay of the Graves of Rafts or the Winds of August, they would replay these plays, and we would look at our mistakes on the screen. Our imperfections as human beings would be played out on the screen, and we would reflect and talk about it, and we would move on. Yet, not a news cycle will pass in this nation over the next week without a significant impact of something dealing with gun violence. We can't skip a news cycle. Yet, when we have a shooting like we had here in Lafayette, the national media show up. The only thing that tops the national media is if somebody got a foreign name and he's from the Middle East. Holy hell. The bottom fall out. Wolf Blitzer take over CNN and go to 24-hour coverage. We're in a rating war talking about some dude from the Middle East whose grandparents were born there, still retains the name, and was caught on an Islamic website. Look out. The entire FBI, when the two Boston bombers killed those people up at the marathon, that night reported on television, if you believe just part of it, was 7,000 police were involved in looking for those two men. That weekend, 9 people were shot and killed in Chicago. It was a byline stuck somewhere in the 4th page of the average newspaper. You see, somehow we have placed a high value if we get killed by a terrorist. If we would have put the same emphasis on every death in America, we would end this problem. You agree with me? Let that had been a terrorist come to Lafayette and shot in the theater. Let that had been a terrorist and see how things would have changed. Every city deserved to have a police department like New York City. Every city, but we don't. You see, I remember 8 years ago when I was a smoking man, I went to New York City, wanted to buy a cigar, couldn't find one, and asked the guy for a pack of Marlboro. It was $8. That's 8 years ago. You could still buy them in Louisiana for $2.25. You see, they figured out a way how to do what? Resource state law enforcement. And by and large, their numbers look relatively good for a big city. Taken into context, when you look at what the professors have given us, some facts and some expert analysis of some of those facts, the way I deduce this is this can be reduced to an element of our national security. We have certainly identified the fact that terrorism in America threatens our national security. It questions our authority as a nation to protect our people. But on the backside of the marathon, 9 dead in Chicago. When President Obama was running for president, I was in Chicago at the National Latino Convention. At the Chicago Convention Center, I had gone in there with a CNN team to do a presentation on disaster response and resiliency. That weekend, the president, as a nominee for the president of the United States, spoke in Berlin. You remember that when he gave that great speech? And spoke to Europe and the world about peace and how we're going to grow together as a nation. That weekend, 8 people were killed in Chicago. And I'm saying to myself, how can this not capture the attention of the American people? You see, somehow we have compartmentalized this in our culture. If it's us shooting us, it makes a news cycle, and it moves off the front page. And then when it does happen in a mass event, like what happened here in the theater, which, brings out the national media, Anderson Cooper and the rest of our friends in the media, the local government somehow get us to strictly focus on the grief of the family. By the time we go through that and we grieve with these families, what happened then? News cycle has kicked another one out that we are now focused on. And there's two sides that come out of this, right? The two sides that come out of this, and oh, by the way, the reason I'm here today, that reporter that called me caught me right after lunch. I was fooling around with my horse, Big Red, and he called me wanting to know if I was going to run for governor. I said, man, you'll know tomorrow by noon, because I was contemplating running for governor. And he got me pretty fired up asking that question, because he kept asking it every few hours. He said, well, tell me what you think about this gun violence over in Lafayette. And that laid heavy on my heart. And I just spoke out. Again, remember, I don't have a PR team. I'm an army of one now. I don't send this by a focus group to determine whether it's right. There's no teleprompter here for me to look at and exchange with you. You understand? But I came to talk about what I tried to articulate in this book in 2009. We got a gun problem, but we're in a state of denial. And we can't have a decent conversation about it. You know, when we had the conversation about cigarettes, how did we solve that problem? First of all, the government said we got a problem. Then what happened? We put it in education. We started to educate people about the dangers of smoking. Then, oh Lord, Hollywood got a hold of it. And those creative minds, like these kids that's running these cameras, you know, they started showing people lungs. And they brought these people on who had been operated on from getting cancer in the throat. I mean, it was like watching a horror show when they showed the effects and they showed these lungs. You pick up a paper and you're reading about Buddha, and the next thing you know, wow, one of them lungs would show up on you. I mean, they captured our attention. We haven't quite done this with the gun. We haven't quite done that. We always find a way to attribute it to something else. So, government made movies, made PSA, public service announcement, every famous actress or actor. We even came up with a law where you can't smoke on television. You remember the day when Johnny Carson used to sit there and smoke? All that went away. We made a cultural shift. That's what we did. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a cultural shift. We're not saying we're going out and we're going to pick up everybody's guns. We don't need to stop that lie. That is not the intent. But we got to do something different than what we're doing now. Again, when you talk about mass shooting, if you would listen to CNN and Fox and CNBC, you would think all of them happen in theaters and schools. The majority of them, ladies and gentlemen, happen in homes. People who know each other. Crimes of passion. And you saw the times they happened. Midnight to 2 in the morning, somebody's coming in or going out, or somebody getting caught going in or going out. And around supper time, around 6 o'clock. A lot of friction. That's when they're happening. How are we going to target our messaging to our people that gun violence is not a solution to our differences? We've got a gun culture. You saw in that little opening scene again, I was telling the police to put their guns down. Here, this is Friday afternoon. Katrina hit Monday. Oh, by the way, 29 years ago today, I was in Acadia. I was parked on the step of the Cameron Parish Courthouse. That's where I was. 10 years ago today. We were trying to move cows out of Cameron Parish and help those farmers get back in their home. 10 years ago today as we speak. How do we go from rescuing people from a storm to pointing guns at them? How did we get there? You remember 10 years ago? What was the discussion in the news after a few days in New Orleans? The discussion was about what? Looting. That was the discussion. I think we need to start distinguishing the difference between looting and survival after a disaster. And we need to school the media on that, and I try to school them every time. But when the national media started talking about looting in a state that, as the professor said, got all this honor built up in it, people talk to our state senior leadership and say, hey, we've got to put the shoot to kill order out. And it took me a few hours to try to get that turned around, but that dog was already out the box. When they get a state news conference about this time in the afternoon on Thursday, preceding our deployment on Friday to go get the people out of the convention center, it had been put out in a news conference in Baton Rouge that shoot to kill. Get this. The people that we are trying to scare are who? The people in New Orleans. Guess what? They don't have no television. They don't have no radios. So who in the hell is this message targeted at? Note, communications experts here in ULL, when you leave, make sure your message is going to go to the people intended. It played well in Chicago. It played well in Washington, D.C. by those rough and tough Congress and senators. Damn it, they're getting control of the situation. They're going to shoot to kill. How quick we surrender ourselves to what our cultural pattern is. I heard a story here a couple of weeks ago, made my heart flutter. Because in my first book, I talk about this a lot, Survivor, about people were misreading people going in places to get food and water. And when I give it in my motivational speeches about resiliency, I tell people, look, there were people taking stuff in New Orleans. There were a lot of people getting food and water to take care of their family. That's called survival. You and I can no way defend some dude in waist-deep water, you understand, with a 52-inch TV on his back, coming out of a store. But there's something fundamentally wrong with that dude. Nobody in their right mind would steal a damn 52-inch TV in a flood. And there's no power. And it's already been underwater. There's something fundamentally wrong. He goes in the category of stupid. You don't have to shoot him. You can catch him later. He's just not right. We all have them in our families. Don't tell me you see them at Thanksgiving. You know, they show up. But there's no reason to shoot them. But I'm telling you that because that was the proverbial message on the media, the shoot to kill idea. And I've coached mayors and governors around. If I ever hear you talking about shooting to kill your own citizens, I will ask for you to be taken out of office. Because the democracy is not working when you lower weapons on your own citizens for protesting or for disagreeing with you or asking for help. And in this case, people were asking for help. They were pleading for help. So we go into that scenario. That's what happened the night before about this idea of shooting to kill. So I talked to Adjutant General Andrew New, Adjutant General of the National Guard, and we had spoken the night. And I said, you know, it's best if we tell the troops put their weapons down when they go up toward the convention center tomorrow. We're going up Poydras, You're going to turn right on Convention Boulevard and go toward the Convention Center, or Convention Avenue, whatever it's called. And he said, I agree with you. The problem is the troops had already started to do what? Move toward New Orleans. Just like we had a problem in the governor communicating with the people in New Orleans that help was on the way and people were going to be shoot to kill all that had been given, we didn't have perfect communication with our troops. They knew where they were going. They knew what their mission was, to take food and water and to start evacuating people from the convention center. But we were not good enough because we didn't have perfect communications. And as it worked out, those first truckloads of troops that showed up, guess what they were doing? Because the evening before, the police chief in New Orleans had said the word sniper. And when you say the word sniper, the troops who just came out of Afghanistan and Iraq, guess what they do? They go into counter-sniper drill, which is a gun pointing in each direction. And guess which one the national media cameras focused on? The one focused at the people on the ground. The exact picture we were trying to avoid was about to play out, because my concern was this. Troops with loaded guns, there's a probability, I can't give it to you what it is, I can go to the National Army Safety Center and give it to you, they will have accidental discharges. When you look at the categories the FBI put, 15,000 suicide a year, another 12,000 homicide, there's about 300 in there that are unintentional from accidents. That's what because if we had a weapon go off, either from one of those SWAT officers or from one of our troops, you can only imagine the hell we would have on our hand with the people who have been waiting for 7 days to be evacuated. It would have been a scene I would not want to see play out in America. So we put the weapons down. But all that comes from what? That's our normal response. Now we get people here and knock on the front door and they end up shooting some kids who are running up to the front door in the middle of the night asking for help. We've had 2 of those in the last year or so. Some kid run on the front door and say, help, help, and end up getting shot. Again, it's not guns, right? But think about this. In order to drive a car in America, what you got to do? Right. Getting a license requires you to do what? Take a test. Guess who you think has the best gun safety training program in America, beside the military? The NRA. The police send their people to the NRA to learn how to shoot. They got some of the best. Now, they don't talk about that. And I'm not trying to pick a fight with the NRA. They got a lot more money than I have. Please don't get them after me. Let them go figure out some other freak they want to run after. But let me say this. They have some of the best gun safety training in America. The police send some of their instructors to them to learn how to shoot. And they advocate people going to gun safety. They won't say that on television, but it is a way they sustain and make money through their gun safety training. But if you've got to get a license to drive a car, well, you don't have to get a license to get a gun. You see, we have confused this concept of what? What's that magic word? Rights. The Holy Grail, the rights. But things have changed since those rights were first issued, right? But somehow we want to live in the days of when those rights. What year were those rights written, Professor? What year was that written? Anybody remember? The right to bear arms. What year? 1776. Huh? 1776. Was that the year? Why don't somebody Google that for me right quick? Young lady, Google that. 17 what? Okay, do we want to roll back the tape to 1791? I wouldn't even be here. I'd be outside picking grass or something in 1791 if we went by them laws. Or over here as a cook. If we went by those laws, what's so emphatic about that law, we cannot adjust it to the 21st century? I'm telling you, I've spent 9.5 years overseas, and nowhere I went, other than in war zones, have I seen such a gun culture. Matter of fact, when I was growing up in college, and I had one myself one time for a weekend, we used to carry our guns in the back of our pickup trucks. Y'all remember that? If you came to Lafayette and you rode the New Iberia, every other pickup truck had a what? A 30-06 in the back, a gun rack. Or a 30-30. Or a shotgun. I mean, we used to pack. Something's happened along the way, hadn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Those farmers carried that because what? They'd go out in the fields, they'd have all kind of problems with varmints, with the cattle, and you name it. But things have changed since then. Somehow, I don't think I've seen a gun rack in the last 15 years. They just became what? A bad message. It was just another gun to be stolen. And people stopped carrying them because too many of them were getting stolen. Back to the root cause. I think you've heard some academic analysis today that we should pay particular attention to. In my book, not aware of the work that these two professors have done, but I think there's a relationship, not to the gun violence that necessarily happened in Lafayette or in Newtown. I'm talking about every day the 88 that die, okay? I think Newtown and Lafayette are exceptions, just like all gun violence are exceptions. When you look at, what is the percentage of the people in America with guns? You remember that number today? 35. About 35%. Some show 25%. The other 70% don't own guns. They don't own any. I think there's a relationship when you go where the concentration of where those shootings have happened, that people on people, people who know each other, violence. There's a relationship to poverty. There's a relationship to reading. You combine that with alcohol and drugs, and you got a toxic mix. Those two little babies we picked up on the street. And then, let me just digress for a minute, and I'll come back to the babies. Remember, I was about to tell you about the babies. 3 weeks ago, on Saturday, I was at a funeral in New Orleans. One of the things I did after Katrina was lend my name to the Honorary Center for Student Achievement. It's a program for young African-American males in Louisiana who want to go to college, who don't qualify for college. They don't qualify because they don't meet the SAT, and they don't meet the grade point average, and they don't have economics. Dr. Ron Mason at Southern started this program. We put him in college with no discussion of money. You say you want to go to college, we put you in college. We got an 84% retention rate for African American males in college. Nobody else is, not even Harvard's doing that. When we started that, I ran into one of the characters running for governor now, and he told me, he said, I said, what are you going to do about the crime in the state? He said, we're going to build more jails. And my answer to him was, how is that working out? You see, the common thread with those babies we picked up, I spent a lot of time with the Children's Defense Fund, and I think they have corralled some data there we can work on. When we look at the problems in New Orleans, the problem in Baton Rouge, the problems in pockets right here in Lafayette, and in Lake Charles, and up in Shreveport. In those pockets, those babies that we picked on the street, they were 9 months old. When we picked them up, those babies had blood coming out of their nose. They were dehydrated. We put them on a Coast Guard barge and had them flown to LSU in New Orleans, in Baton Rouge, where they were cared for. Those babies, by statistics that I looked at from the Children's Defense Fund, single mom, living off a part-time job in government assistance, those babies, poor babies, if they're not reading at 4th grade level by the time they're 10 years old, Their data show those babies got a 40% chance of having a run-in with the law by the time they're 14 years old. And I put that data in the book. Ladies and gentlemen, that's human capital. We can't afford to lose that human capital. If you go to Angola and you ask what the reading level is, nearly 90% of them don't read at the 4th grade level. Dual. Much of the extenuating issue of how somebody ended up with a gun in their hand is related to reading and whether they finish high school or not. That's the data I heard and was in much discussion with the Children's Defense Fund after Katrina. They would bring me in and we'd talk about resiliency and impact of disasters on kids. And I would sit there and I listened to this and went back in and pulled some of that data into the book. But it speaks to the point of we got a cause and effect here. We can deal with this. Think about if we had 2 teachers in every school between pre-K and 6th grade in Louisiana. 2 teachers, 2 qualified teachers. All it would do is double our current price of education. Is that a bad thing to spend money on? I don't think that's a bad thing to spend money on. Education, the results are in Angola. The people we miss. When we talked about starting the Honorary Center and that candidate told me about just building more prisons, the only difference between those young men and their cousins is like the difference between charcoal and diamond, heat and pressure. We put heat and pressure on them. And you know what? They're going into their senior year. But 3 weeks ago, we buried one of them. And thank God in the last 24 hours, the Jefferson Parish Sheriff caught the perpetrator who killed that young man, Devon Liggett. Devon Liggett, on the opening weekend of college, he spent the summer. Because see, we don't let the honorary men go home during the summer. We keep them on campus. Because we want them to stay in an environment that assists them in being successful in college. We keep them there. And he attended summer school, even though he had gone out of the honorary program. He stayed with our message. He had been conditioned for success. And he went to visit a sister in Gretna. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, in that hot zone, you remember that hot zone between 12 and 2? He was shot 9 times. Now, I'm going to bet when we roll this out who shot him, I bet you can't read at 4th grade level. I bet he'd been picked up by the police before. We got a pattern, ladies and gentlemen. We got to fix that. But we got to have an adult conversation in Louisiana because that's where we live. This is the place we shape. But I don't know if Louisiana is one of the states, but we have 40 states that's been influenced by the National Lobby Organization to have restrictions on what laws state parishes and cities can have on creating their own gun law. You know, if you wanted to create your own gun law in Lafayette, you'd have to get some permission from the state, right, of Louisiana. Because we passed a law that you can carry a gun in church. Now, is that some dumb shit or what? And we let them get away with it. You know the worst thing in a democracy is that we see a wrong and we let them get away with it. And we re-elect them. That's the sad part about it. So when we see this problem, we're looking at it in the mirror in the morning. We are part of the problem because we accept that. That legislature should have never been able to cross that I-10 bridge when they passed something that dumb. Yet they come back to the community and they tell you, well, we got y'all a new building for the university. Then everybody's happy. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to do something about this if we want this to change in Louisiana. 88, and we're one of the leading states in the nation that have people being killed by gun violence. Our numbers don't work out. And again, I think it relates to what? Multiple generations of poverty, reading, mental health assistance, and this contraband economy. I can close this problem in New Orleans, trust me. I will close down the access to drugs in Louisiana. Those young kids out of the 9th Ward, who do you think they were selling that marijuana to? Them 100,000 college students in New Orleans. Hello? Them kids on the other side of the track over here that get a multiple arrests for marijuana, who do you think they're selling that marijuana to? Some of it ends up on this campus. It's the contraband economy. And it's gone from marijuana now to what? Prescription drugs and fabricating, what do you call this now? Artificial drugs, whatever that word is. Synthetic drugs. That runs through the contraband economy. Look, Johnny, 18, did graduate, now has a wife or a partner and has a baby. That baby wants shoes. Hello? That baby mama wants a dress. You're not going to make it making minimum wage working as a bus person in a hotel in New Orleans where we don't recognize the right for a living wage. We've got a tourism industry that equals the amount of money that the oil and gas make in Louisiana. According to the governor's 2014 budget, the oil and gas provide 15% of our income. That's the same amount that's provided to this state through tourism and our fishing industry. Hello, wake up. When your difference in Texas, they make 5 different types of cars in Texas. How many type of cars do we make in Louisiana? 0. We got to wake up, ladies and gentlemen. We can be involved. Sessions like this, I hope we have another one in another 60 or 90 days where we come in and talk about the solutions. Talking about the problem is just the beginning. It's like alcoholism. The first step toward of being cured is what? Recognition. Admit you got a problem. We got to admit how we're going to deal with this problem. You're a state university. A part of your charter is to solve the problems of the state. You with me? And I am proud to be here today to share with you as a fellow Louisiana this idea that we don't live in a perfect world. The Pope just came here and told us we don't live in a perfect world. We're all not perfect. But 88 people a day dead because of guns. Think about what we could do if we committed in the next 10 years to cut that in half. And we're not talking about taking people guns, but we're talking about being able to have an adult conversation. Right now, if I had this conversation somewhere out of this campus, there would be an equal number of people, what, carrying signs and what? And burning my picture before I leave town. The last time I spoke about this, some idiot from that organization wanted me to turn my passport in, wanted me and the president to turn my passport in. Now, get this. Yeah, I own a passport. I got it because I had to go to a foreign country. Fool. And spent 9.5 years there, overseas protecting your sorry ass. To have a right to say what you wanted to say. Excuse my French, I know that y'all don't use that kind of language down here in college, but I come at a cheap price. And I'm glad you share that moment of humor with me. But if you look at it, you could almost create a comedy routine. That's the essence of this tragedy. That's the essence of this tragedy. We're going to change it when we accept we must have a cultural shift. We got to do it with policy, we got to do it with education, and we got to do it with entertainment. One tell us what and how to do it, right? One describe to us why, and the other one allow us to see ourselves. We got to see ourselves. We need to have plays. We need to have books written about this. We need to take what these scholars have said and turn it into action. And that's all I had to say about that. We got time for a couple questions? To quote the great Forrest Gump. Now, I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook. If you tweet, the 5 people that tweet, I'll give you a free book. Is that a deal? Yeah. So I'll be around for about 20 minutes. I'll be at the front. You'll see my car out there. You come by and show me your tweet. You got to mention the university. You got to say the name of the event you were at today and some comment you might have heard today from any of our presenters. If you tweet it or you Facebook it, I'll give you a book. And a student, if you don't have time to do it now, if you talk to the professor, you show it to him in the next couple of days, I will send you the book. Is that a deal for students? Okay. Questions? Social media is a way for us to communicate what we learn. And I'm on Facebook is Russell Honoré. On Twitter is LTG Russell Honoré. Yes, sir.
Sam Birdsong from New Orleans. I just watched a documentary called 91%. And in that documentary, it ends with the idea that the story is 91% of Americans agree that we should have stronger background checks or something like that. So you're talking about a cultural change. And I'm just asking, there's no change there. We already agree. So what's the cultural change that needs to take place when 91% of Americans already agree?
Well, I think in that question, I don't know, I think you may be in a better position to answer that. What do you think the answer to that is? What's your opinion on it?
I mean, you know, you read the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, we think we're in a democracy. It's set up to protect minorities. You know, the biggest minority is perhaps the 1%. So it's complicated. We have a minority of people who are influencing major policy. They're fighting against, in essence, what 91% of Americans actually don't disagree on. So I don't know. I mean, is that a cultural change or is it?
Well, I think we start off with policy. You know when I said we got a cultural shift? Yeah. You start off with what? Government policy to be able to have an adult conversation inside the Congress and the Senate of the United States to say what adjustments do we want to have over the next 5 years so everybody can get the in and out of office done. We got to find a equitable solution to this, that in 5 years we want to have some laws that might adjust the right to bear arms and have that driven into law in 5 years. So we get a time to do what? Do the mental shift, to talk about it, to argue about it, to find equitable solutions about it. Again, 40 states have been driven. They can't, nobody below the state level can create any law that would adjust have adjustment to the right to bear arms. There's no way a state, if Lafayette, now on private property, people can say whether you can open carry or not. I wouldn't want to go in Raging Cajun Stadium or in Tiger Stadium with everybody packing heat. There'd be something fundamentally wrong with that. I wouldn't want to go in a football stadium. I wouldn't want to go in a high school game where people are carrying guns. We are just too emotionally charged to be able to deal with that. As a part of our internal culture, and the other thing we like to do when we're having fun is having a drink. One of the issues I issued in New Orleans, and I had problems with my own formation. I said, no drinking. General order number 1 from the commander of the 1st Army. No alcohol. Guess what came to me within the first 5 days? Oh, General, you ought to see the FBI, they down there drinking, and the Secret Service. What that's got to do with us? Picture this. One of my soldiers from the Louisiana National Guard and one from the 82nd Airborne on Bourbon Street with an M16 in one hand and a Bud Tall Boy in the other. That picture does not match. That's something you saw in World War II movies, and most of that was lies. That's something you saw in movies from Vietnam, where you see people sitting around with a bottle of Jack Daniels in one hand, a reefer in one hand, fighting the enemy. That's the bad side of what Hollywood could do for us for entertainment. I said, no, we're not going to have troops standing around with a weapon in your hand and a can of beer or a bottle of whiskey. And that's an argument I had against my own formation. Because people thought that would be cool to allow the troops to drink. After all, as some of my commanders told me, these troops just got back from Afghanistan. So what? Just have them think they're still in Afghanistan. Get over it. Yes, ma'am.
You said something so deeply intriguing earlier about going to Congress and reframing our gun violence issue as a national security issue. I would love to explore that, but also with the caveat knowing that Congress really doesn't do anything, particularly in our foreign policy, that doesn't net them some national security or fiscal return. So is there an argument that we can make in our own national security, in our own concept around gun violence, that Congress would find compelling enough to go in that direction?
I would be afraid to speculate, but I know all good change that have happened in this nation, everything as we've grown from 239 years ago, from equity, from human justice, from social justice to equity. You know, it wasn't a little more than 100 years ago, half the people in this room couldn't vote. And I'm talking about the women. Because Congress didn't think you were worthy of this right to vote. So it's not like the Congress into itself has always gotten it right. They have not. And there's no reason for us to sit here today to believe that they have the pulse on what's going on in America. You agree with me? So I do think that we can force a discussion. We have to be able to speak about the unspeakable. If we can't look at the root cause of why kids can't read, what it is poverty. Poor kids go to poor schools. They get poor health care, and they have poor family support groups. How can we deal with that? Now, on the other hand, people would say, well, you grew up poor. I did. I was number 8 of 12. We live on a subsistence farm in Pointe-Coupee Parish. We rented our land. We didn't even own the land we farmed. We were not sharecroppers, though, because sharecropper was below our status. See, we didn't really realize how poor we were. And then when we had bad sugarcane crops, the government would come in and give us commodities, big blocks of cheese and sacks of flour, 40 and 50-pound sacks of flour and barley, something we never ate. We'd give that to the hogs. As something they put in that bag from northern states, you know, when they had barley and oats, we wouldn't eat that. We ate grits. But we've made it year after year off those government commodities. And today, that was a hand up. A result of that, I was the first one in the family to go to college, and here I am today because of what they call government handouts. But they were real food for real people, and it kept us alive. I think we need to ensure that our kids are not hungry. It's a shame to live in the most bountiful country in the world to know we got kids that are hungry. Feed them. Solve that problem. Do direct aid, feed them breakfast when they get to school in the morning. We got to keep these kids in school. Now, That dude that came here to Lafayette and shut, he came out of a different what? He came out on a different path. But remember what I told you, that dude and some dude from the Middle East get what? All the attention. There was even some crazy elected officials that said after the shooting in Charlotte, boy, if they had guns, it might have been to take them out. Professing that the people in Charlotte, in some way, if they were armed, less people would have gotten killed. I mean, how ridiculous that is. Just as you have a right to carry a weapon, I think I ought to have an inalienable right not to carry one. You agree with me on that? And we ought to be working toward that. But we've got to be able to speak about the unspeakable. And that is an issue we still have not solved. We're in the second poorest state in America and the third largest energy producer. We got a problem. Even in this town, we got a problem where we still got open sewer. And we pass by it and we think that's okay. What do you think those kids going to grow up coming out from places with open sewer? It all attribute to this at the end of the day. Nobody care about them, and guess what they do? You think they got 2 teachers in the classroom? Show me where kids are reading at grade 11, and I'll show you a bunch of kids. My son went to a school in Atlanta, $20,000 a year to go to school. Guess how many times the police came there the 4 years he was there? Not one. 3 blocks away, the cops were parked there. What's the difference? Economics. Professors, y'all can figure that out. And you had another question in the back. I'm sorry, I'm over. I spoke too long. Yes.
Hi, General. My name is Victoria, and I'm the Gulf Coast Organizing Manager for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. And a lot of my colleagues feel like, I've got Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and we're trying to push gun sense in those places. And it's a little tricky, but I really love the Deep South. I'm from here. I would like to hear your perspectives on why Louisiana is uniquely poised to solve this epidemic.
The thing that creates our problem is the same thing that will give us the ability to solve it. We are a very diverse and resilient people. When I left Louisiana to go in the Army, I said we were more economically segregated than we are and than anything else. The rich people, kids went to town, we went to public school, segregated public school. I went to segregated school all my life. I think the things that make us unique, that make us a destination. New Orleans and Lafayette lead the state in destinations where people come to see and share a different culture. I think our answer is in our strength, our ability to assimilate. We speak our own language. We have our own code. We have our own food. I think, how do we capture that? And on Saturday when we play football, we're all one state. How do we take that spirit that happened for a few hours on Saturday and turn that into a solution to our issues? Who would have thought 100 years ago that the entire state of Louisiana would be cheering for a kid named Fournette out of the 7th Ward in New Orleans? That's unity. It's powerful. You can walk in the corner store and people are talking about Fournette, a proud son of the state of Louisiana. How do we capture that moment and turn that into our solution? Because I do think our culture is different. We have allowed some people to turn us into a red and a blue society. We, for my time in Louisiana, it wasn't always fair, but we were always friends. We recognized our differences, either through not just racially and other things, but we shared a culture. We could talk to each other in Creole. And we shared a culture. And when the farmers stood on the headland and one of them got a bottle of whiskey, they would pass it around and they drank from it. Or if they came and they went in a corner store here in Acadia someplace, somebody walked in and they started rapping some Creole and everybody was on it. We didn't distinguish people by the political party. And somewhere along the way, we have been divided like we're different people. We are the same people. How do we capture that moment of enthusiasm that people had throughout the state? Even Raging Cajuns fan, when you saw Fournette carrying that ball, that unifying effort that it created and the pride that it brought to our state. When you tuned into the Georgia game to see how bad they were beating Southern, and the baddest band in the land walked on the field, and the pride it gave our people. And when you go to New Orleans and you see in the Mardi Gras parade, and here come the Marching 100 from St. Aug, or the Tiger Band, or the LSU Band, and the Grambling Band, and that chill jump on your arm and say you're Louisiana pride. That's what we've got to capture. We've got to capture that euphoric feeling that we get for being Louisiana. We got to stop talking about our differences and celebrating our common culture that we share. We all eat boudin, too much of it, from latest statistics and looking at me. Let us bring together on this campus to celebrate the things that we share, to recognize the things that we have difference about, and in small rooms speak about the unspeakable. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you very much.